Hello everyone, my name is Dante and I have something different for you today. I've recently been wanting to get into the horror reading community, so I've selected 3 stories from the subreddit Let's Not Meet to read for you today. Links to each of these stories can be found in the description if you'd like to read them on your own, as well as to credit the authors. Enjoy. So this happened quite a while ago, but it just came to my brain after reading a story about someone's experience at work with a customer. I have a story about the weirdest shit I've ever been a part of. Probably around 2 years ago, I had gotten a job at a certain Australian rip-off steakhouse in my hometown. I was really excited to start this job because it'd been the first time I'd had a job while in school that year due to how busy I was. It was a nice, healthy distraction from the constant schoolwork and extracurriculars. Plus, I was getting paid. Being able to afford food was a fun thought. I didn't think I'd ever be so excited to buy hamburger meat. My days there were a lot of fun, but we had this one horribly mean manager named Steven that would get super upset and angry at other employees. But you would never get upset at me. Steven was probably in his mid-60s, and he was the kind of guy you could just tell hadn't been happy with how his life turned out. Now, I was a super hard worker, and I liked my job, but there was definitely some times that I deserved to get yelled at. But he never would. All of my coworkers started making jokes that I was Steven's favorite. It got to a point where I would be on shift with some other girls, and he would rip into them for stuff that was definitely wrong on both of our parts, but would never touch me. Eventually, I wasn't capable of putting up with the poor treatment of my coworkers anymore, and pulled aside another manager to see if I could get justice for my fellow servers. Let's call him Elliot. Elliot and I had become super close since I started working there, and when he sat down with me, he held me as I cried over my uncertainty. This job meant the world to me, and I didn't want to lose it. He reassured me that it was all right, and that he could handle it. Over the next few weeks, he would make me feel better whenever something happened, and he constantly reassured me that action from corporate was coming. About 2 months after the original complaint, I decided to take a vacation to Texas to visit my mother. I said bye to everyone at work, and for a whole 2 weeks, had so much fun hanging out with my mom. Easily the break I needed from the work environment. Not too long after I get back from my vacation, I come back to work, and just after a few shifts, I realize that Elliot isn't there anymore. I figured that Steven had him fired for standing up, and I was livid. In my anger, I started talking to my coworkers about the bullshit, and they all looked confused and baffled at what I was saying. After stopping mid-sentence and asking them why they were looking at me like that, a coworker corrected me and told me that's not why he got fired at all. Elliot had been caught keeping 2 8-year-old boys in his basement. He was arrested, and that's why he was fired. Apparently, he had also been caught in the past for publicly urinating on a 7-year-old and beating his own children who got taken away from him permanently when he went to prison for the first time. Both boys were safely returned to their parents, but they'd been there for at least 2 months from what I remember. Needless to say, I was done with that restaurant and quit on the spot. So Elliot, do me a big favor, and let's not meet again. Back about 6 or 7 years ago, my mom had a boyfriend named Dave. He was really chill and bought me graphic t-shirts and toys, but we never bonded to the point where I would consider him a good friend of mine. I only saw him a couple times a week, and only when he was with my mom. Long story short, Dave and my mom didn't last more than a couple of months, and Dave and I didn't stay in contact. When I asked my mom why they weren't together anymore, she then told me that Dave was too crazy for her. It would be a few weeks later that I would realize just how crazy this guy was. I remember distinctly that Dave would show up to my house uninvited on multiple occasions, bringing my mom gifts and begging her to take him back. Every time he did this, he was shooed off our property, but it didn't stop there. Dave started showing up at my mom's work, mailing us things, and being even more of a general creep. This went on for some weeks until eventually, one way or another, it stopped. About a year ago, my mom told me some information she wanted to withhold from me when I was young. After being silent for a while, David found out information about my dad and gave the company a call, which unfortunately, it was my dad who answered. Dave's call was unexpected as my dad knew nothing about this man who claimed to be my mother's boyfriend, even after they had broken up. He asked my dad for information about me, like where I was currently and if I was busy. When my dad asked why, Dave said he wanted to take me away to the amusement park. Just me and him. Thankfully, my dad found it sketchy and hung up, then told my mom about it. Being my mother, she was shocked that someone who had practically been stalking us had tried to weasel his way through my family to take me somewhere fun. To this day, I still don't know what his real intentions were with me, and I don't like to think about it as it really creeps me out. With that, I hope we never meet again. There's a lot that had happened within our family before this event, so let me explain. My mom's brother, who for the sake of this story I'll call Clark, has been married to this woman for over 20 years now, and they have one child together. Growing up, I've always been told that my aunt was a little off, and was instructed by my mother to stay clear of her if I had the chance. She seemed pretty normal to me until I was about 10, and she started harassing my mother and my grandparents. She would occasionally hit on my grandfather and show up to their house unannounced and would occasionally start fights. We had to block her on all our phones, and my uncle was told that she is no longer allowed at ours or our grandparents' property. Years had gone by without much issue towards us, but for the past few years, she's been mentally abusing my uncle along with my cousin, and once, in a fit of rage, she peed on the floor in front of my cousin. Yes, full-on squatted and relieved herself. My cousin has since moved out. With all the background information out of the way, let's get on to the main story. It was Christmas Eve a year ago, and as for tradition, we were having dinner at my grandparents' house. It was my grandparents, mom, dad, brother, uncle, cousin, and their dog Holly. We were at the dinner table, which was in view of the front porch windows, when we hear the doorbell ringing furiously and the door being pounded on. As we looked over at the window, who do we see? My aunt. My uncle gets up and goes outside to talk to her. From the table, we hear a bit of yelling, and my uncle opens the door to come back in, when all of a sudden she grabs the dog and threatens to take it away if my uncle doesn't give her money. At this point, my parents are outside watching this along with a few neighbors. My uncle gets in the car with her, and before she gets in to drive, she yells, "What the fuck are you looking at? I know I'm beautiful. God loves me." Then she gets in the car and speeds off. So we're all at the windows, stunned and confused. All the while, my cousin is texting his father just to make sure he's okay. He lets us know that he is, and that he was going to an ATM to get her some money, so they would leave her alone. After about an hour or so later, my uncle gets back with the dog and tells us that she was basically holding him hostage because he didn't give her enough money. But finally, with a bit of bribing, she brought him back, and I haven't seen her since. The rest of that night obviously had a lot of tension, and I watched the road behind us all the way home, scared that she was following us. Since the incident, things have escalated at the house. We have found out that she was doing drugs and has been cheating on my uncle for a while now. For those asking why we didn't call the cops, he told us not to. I don't know why, but he hasn't done much about her except tell her he wants a divorce, but nothing has come of that. So, my crazy aunt who has threatened my family? Let's not meet again.